Доброе утро, Dr. Moritz.
Доброе утро.
Thank you for finding time to do this interview.
Очень приятно.
Can you start by explaining your background experience and what you're doing now?
Well, I have a varied background. I started my career out as an international banker with what is now JP Morgan Chase. So I was a lender to multinational corporations and central banks in Europe and in Eastern Europe as well. So some of my clients included central banks in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, as well as corporations that did business there. So trade finance and corporate finance was what I did in the initial part of my career. And then I was a banker for some time after that, doing different types of banking in the oil industry, as well as in the financial institutions industry, as well as startup corporations. I left the banking industry to become an academic, a student. So to take a master's and a PhD in international relations, international political economy, and subsequently became a professor, later on a dean, and later on a vice provost and a consultant in these various areas. So, right, that's a quick clip of some of the things that I've done in my career.
That is very impressive. I also know that you're fluent in multiple languages. One of them is Russian. Can you tell me how did you start learning Russian in the university? What was the reason?
That's a very common question, by the way. People love to ask me that question. Ever since 40 some years ago, I decided to study Russian. It actually started when I was in high school. I told my uncle that I was just thinking about studying Spanish as a 17-year-old. And he said, no, Barry, think about Russian or Chinese. There are too many people who can speak Romance language. So that attracted me as a young boy. My university didn't offer Chinese. I would learn it later. And so I decided I would double major in Russian and political science and with a specialization in international relations. And subsequently studied in the Soviet Union and then used that Russian later in life as well.
Why do you think Russian is important in today's world?
Aside from the utilitarian function, I'll talk about that in a second, of what you can use it for. For me, it's what you can enjoy it for. Russian is one of the great languages of the world because it's the language of one of the great cultures and one of the great civilizations of the world. Russia has incredible excellence in a whole variety of fields that include science, literature, music, and a host of other cultural areas. So that in and of itself is my primary reason as an adult for intensely remaining engaged in Russian. So I enjoy reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Pushkin. I enjoy Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff. I enjoy reading the great work of scientists, currently and historically. And I appreciate the educational system, for example, particularly in the sciences in Russia. So that's the first reason. But in terms of career or more utilitarian purposes that most people think of, Russia is one of the major countries in the world, and it's a major power, so that always makes a difference.
Let's continue with the topic of utilitarian use of Russian. Being a NAFSA board member, how do you use the language on a day-to-day basis?
Well, keep in mind that NAFSA is the Association of International Education. So the goal, it's a very large organization. We have a conference that had every year that hosts over 10,000 members from around the world. People involved in international higher education primarily, although we do some K through 12, most of our work is in international higher education. So the mission of this organization is to assist universities advancing their international education mission. And that means lots of things. Of course, it means moving people, professors and students with study abroad, with research, but it also means creating partnerships at all sorts of levels, at the university level, at the governmental level, at private public partnerships. It means doing research together, and it means advancing higher education on an international basis. It means understanding disciplines, specific disciplines, whether it's English or science or business or math, on a global basis. And so my work as a board member, I serve I'm in my second term as a board member of NAFSA, and I also serve as NAFSA's board treasurer. My work as a board member requires me not to manage the organization because we have an excellent team, president and her team of administrators that do that work. But ours is to provide guidance and overall oversight to the organization. But it also involves periodically advancing and relationships. And those relationships are all over the world because we have services and we provide help for universities and other people who provide services to universities all over the world. So for example, I will help with connections and building relationships with various folks. Just 8 weeks ago, I met the Russian ambassador, and he and I both welcomed all of the American and Russian educators at the Russian embassy, the Russian cultural, I forget what it's called, the Russian cultural office in Washington, D.C. And so I gave my welcome in both Russian and in English, and the ambassador gave his welcome in English. And so that was welcomed by the folks who were there, and they appreciated that a great deal. That's just one example.
Today is the last day of your 3-day presentation series here at STARTALK at UCF. I know that you got to meet some students and interact with them. Did the presentations and talking with the participants give you some food for thought for your future projects?
Yes, anytime you have good conversations or interactions with anybody, but especially students, they always help you think about ways where they are, what their hopes are, what they need to prepare them for the world, how you can provide them with materials and with better teaching, and also where you can help with building structures that provide better teaching as well. For example, one of my partners in working with this particular program, STARTALK, is Dr. Kurova. And she and I have been thinking about ways to put together curriculum that helps bridge the cultures of Russia and America in various ways, according to different fields. And so my fields with international relations, finance, as well as international education and higher education, I'm combining those with other traditional Russian language teaching fields to help put together programs that might help future students do better at becoming not only bilingual but bicultural. And these kinds of classes that we're having today help us by being a virtual laboratory, as it were. So this is when we're teaching students, as I'm teaching in various subjects, so is Dr. Kurova and her staff. We learn from them. As I told the students the first day, I'm really not a professor. I introduced myself not as a professor, but as a fellow student, and that I'm sharing with you all what I've learned and the things I wish I would have known, the things I didn't know, and suggesting to you how you might take what I've learned and do even better than I did. So my own field, as I just mentioned to you, is finance and international relations, international education. I'm an administrator and an executive, but not Russian, because I'm a perennial, a constant student of Russian, even today.
Спасибо вам большое и удачи во всех начинаниях.
Да, спасибо.